first event tonight. We are going to be talking to one of the, I don't know if it is the most, but one of the most known brands here in Dubai. They've got a very fascinating story, and yeah, we thought we'd share it with you guys tonight. So if I can get you guys to put hands together, a nice warm welcome for our guests this evening, JC and Slim. So, Dubizzle, we all know it, most of us use it, and most of us, these sofas aren't from Dubizzle, by the way, they're from our sponsors, so, yeah. But anyway, we wanted to hear tonight about your story and find a little bit about what brought you to Dubai, where the idea came from, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of talk through the journey and where you're now and where you're going. So, yeah, let's wind back, 2005 I think it was, 7 years ago, no Burj Khalifa, no Palm. Facebook, what was Facebook? No one, so long ago, but it was, a lot's changed since then. So just talk us through a little bit about what it was, you came to Dubai, and what made this idea in your head, and Dubizzle.com that we know today. So away you go.
So yeah, 2005, Sim and I both kind of showed up in Dubai around the same time. We both worked for the same company out of Europe, and we're doing some work here in the region, kind of project work, really around media sales. We were pretty young, and we had friends who had come to Dubai and had gotten jobs far above their pay scale or their experience level. And so we thought that we would try the same thing. And unfortunately, it didn't really work. We didn't get jobs. No one really wanted to hire us. And we were renting a room off of a friend. And we just had a real hard time doing everything. So not only finding jobs, but furnishing the place. We didn't have a television set for like a year.
So, yeah, I mean, we were just, I guess, really young and had very little to lose, and kind of had ended up on the other side of the world. And, you know, I think like a lot of people at the time, Dubai was such this rapidly expanding place, and there were so many things that it needed that that existed in similarly large places elsewhere, but it had just grown so quickly. And this was one of those things that was just so difficult to get this type of information, whether it be jobs available or apartments, or you know having this secondary market that made it livable and affordable for regular people like us. And so we kind of went through the process of, you know, saying, God, I wish there was something like that here, and then maybe doing a little bit of due diligence, though fairly inaccurate, on what we thought our business plan should be and what it would look like if we actually started it. And then we bought Idiot's Guide to Building a Website, and the rest was history.
So, yeah, as JC mentioned, you know, I think it was a time when there was an equal amount of excitement in the market, with people that were able to come here from all over the world and be able to get jobs that were, compared to their experience, quite well off. And so while there might be a great opportunity from a job standpoint, there wasn't necessarily a real strong community around, say, Australians, or there tended to be definite gaps within the market. And so I think that what we really wanted to do, and what we saw from, you know, coming from the States and the dependence upon, you know, the web to be able to find anything. You know, you go look for whatever and you can find it there for sure. So trying to bridge that gap through, at the beginning, it was more than just a classified site. It was a classified and community site. We had event calendars, and we were trying to sort of bridge the gap between, you know, these societies that we came from and these cultures that we were related to at the time, to Dubai, which was at times, you know, slightly frustrating because of a you know, trying to find that culture, trying to be able to understand where you fit in, as well as be able to just make your life easier with, you know, a couch or a car or a job or apartment or whatever. So yeah.
What's the story behind the name? So, I mean, Dubizzle sounds a bit like Snoop Dogg's latest track. What's the story behind the Dubizzle name?
So Dubizzle is now in 14 countries across the Middle East, from Morocco to Oman, and we've got really big plans. And so Dubizzle, the name, is our hope is that it can be something like Google, That's it's far away from now, but something that's sort of nonsensical, something that creates its own meaning, something that when you say dubizzle it can mean something, and it becomes synonymous with classifieds. But in all honesty, 7 years ago, sitting on a couch trying to think of a name for a classified site, dubizzle was Snoop. What would you call Dubai if Snoop said he was going to Dubai? He would say he was going to dubizzle, my nizzle for shizzle. So, and it was catchy and ringy, and we definitely felt like it was connected to Dubai, but it didn't have to be, and it had sort of long-term value that it would definitely relate locally, but it didn't have to be local. It could be anything. So yeah.
When you guys set up, you were friends. Are you still friends? Has it had its toll? How's that affected the relationship?
We weren't friends when we set it up. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's I saw that one come in. It is a good question. No, we were friends then, we still are friends now. But yeah, I mean, I think that, how do you run a business with a friend and you keep that friendship but you also have that professional relationship? I think it's one that you probably kind of have to figure out along the way, and there's probably ups and downs and trials and tribulations, but you have to kind of always, I guess, take a step back and be like, all right, any kind of business emotions aside or whatever, like at the root of it, we're still friends, and that's important that you maintain that. But I think that I don't think friendship is enough to go into business together. I think that, we probably didn't know that at the time. We're probably just a bit lucky that kind of our strengths and weaknesses were kind of mirror images of one another, more or less. So we kind of were able to be strong where the other was weak, and vice versa.
Would you say that being friends at the very beginning does help? It's like that bashing ideas off each other. You come up with a brainwave, you say, yeah, that's great, no, that's bad, does Snoop like it, all those kind of things. So would you say for the guys out there that are actually looking to go into business, if your pals, go for it, just be strong about it?
I would say that it's important to be friends with one another, because I think if that relationship is really just that dry, that it's going to be really hard because you're going to be spending so much time with this person, and it really is an emotional roller coaster starting up a business. I mean, it's really can be very difficult, and you can have really high highs and really low lows. But I think it is important that if not just to only be friends, but to also make sure that you each bring something to the table that's unique, and there's something, you each have a strength that you really bring to a part of the business that if that person wasn't there would be lacking. So yeah, I mean, I think that those two things are important. The other thing I would say is that, I think that friendship is important, and a lot of the people that we've hired are people that we would be friends with, and that was particularly something that was very important in the beginning, because we'd be in like a single room with these people for a long time. We'd spend day in and day out with these people. You don't want to hang out with somebody that you don't like. So that was really important. I think we really maintained that. That is something maybe unique to coming from a startup environment, because in big corporates, they don't really think about, like, would I be friends with this person? Do I want to hang out with this person? But that was a way that we always approached it. And so I think it came naturally as we expanded. So, you can look at all the people here that work for dubizzle, and they all seem to like each other. I think they do. And I like them. And, we're quite friendly. So friendly with one another. And that's important.
When you went out with the dubizzle brand, so you had the name, you then needed a logo and a brand and a website. Did you do it in-house and learn yourself, or did you outsource it to people? And what would you say are the pros and cons of doing both?
So the first logo, if I could show you, I would, was designed by JC, and it was terrible. It was a photoshopped skyline of Dubai, so it was very Dubai-centric, and it lasted about 3 months. So we eventually, when we committed to the name Dubizzle, we committed to making it a regional name, a global name, hopefully one day. We went out and we outsourced that. We had a designer sort of come up with a number of logos, and there's I think a lot of questions around what does the flaming head guy mean.
Matchstick.
So it was a progression of a conversation that we had around trying to disassociate the word Dubizzle from Dubai, really. And it started out with what is Dubizzle, what could it mean? Subconsciously, it sort of sounds like sizzle. It's sort of, maybe we could, our logo could be a frying pan. We sort of went different ways, and then we gave it to a designer, and he came back with a lot of different selections. And the simplest, sort of cleanest one was this guy with his head on fire. And so we looked at it and we were like, you know what? I think that's symbolic for what Dubizzle could be. You know, it's flammable, and it spreads by word of mouth. And for the first 5 years, we spent very little on marketing. It was the ability for someone to light someone else's head on fire, for that flame to be, to catch a community on fire. So we haven't done a whole lot. We're doing a lot more now that we have an in-house brand team. Right now, we have a very strong in-house brand team, and we're starting to pump out some really creative stuff, but we've always had the desire to sort of use that metaphor towards what Dubizzle can be.
So back in the day when you had the name, the brand, the finance that you brought to the table, was that out of your own pockets, or did you kind of go for funding from the beginning? And what did you have when you were actually at the very early stages?
So I'll start and then you can finish. So we started with $12,000, which was $6,000 each, and we put it into a joint bank account, and we started an Excel spreadsheet to monitor our expenses, and the times were really, really tough. So for the first 2 years, we lived off of 5 to 10 dirhams a meal. We would occasionally let ourselves go out and have a good time, but going to happy hours and definitely like scouring Time Out Dubai for like the best deals in town, mooching off of people and stuff like that. But I think it was critical to what we created. We had to sort of depend on this word of mouth, this ability. We had to make sure that the product worked, that when they listed something, they got a response. When they were looking for something, they were able to find it. It meant every day like going through the newspaper classifieds and texting people, going to the Spinneys community board and texting people. It limited the amount of money we had, made us come up with more creative ideas around finding a solution to that. So yeah, we started with very little, but then over time, obviously we ran out of. $12,000 doesn't last very long. Everyone knows that. So you can talk a little more about that strategy.
Yeah, I think I'd echo everything that Sim said about I guess the constraints, or working within constraints, just creates a need for creativity. And I think we often said many times that had we had a few $1 million to begin with, or a few $100,000, tens of thousands of dollars, anything, we probably would have blown it. It forces you to think a lot less because those constraints aren't there. And so you just kind of maybe follow more kind of tread paths of what other people have done, and that often doesn't work. So yeah, I think that was a big key to our success, and a big key to making us into a successful company down the road once we did have a little bit more money. But yeah, as Sim said, we ran out of money at some point, and we did. Luckily, before we ran out of money, we found an angel investor who was also a business mentor, and was really crucial to the business for many, many years, and still is a big part of the business.
And how soon after you started did that
was
happen?
about, I think, 6 or 7 months into it. It seemed like an eternity, but when you look back, he's been part of it, part of Dubizzle since very, very early on, and that was like we were really lucky to find that, because that was a very informal relationship where we were given funding. We weren't not a lot of pressure was put on us. It wasn't like a VC, and I'm really glad we never actually had to go through that VC stage, because VCs come in and they give you lots of money, and then they say, all right, we're gearing up towards an exit in 3 years, and here's all the financial plans, and let's start doing budgets, and yada, yada, yada. Sorry if anyone's a VC in the room. But you know, that would have been very difficult at that stage to try and kind of put everything into that very established business way of doing things. We were very, you know, month to month or even less, you know, and trying things and going this direction and that and figuring it out along the way. And we did that for many years. And luckily we were able to do that until a point where we actually became profitable and self-sustaining. We didn't actually we eventually did take investment, not from a VC, but from a strategic partner. And that was in order to really expand the business and the business model that already worked into new markets. And that is a great relationship too, because it's not a VC, it's not sorry to harp on VCs again, but there's no pressure to exit, there's the long-term strategy. We're very much on the same page about wanting the best for the business and really wanting a business that lasts forever, as long as we can make it last.
What was the original business model, and how much has it changed to where you are today?
The original business model was what we could glean from what Craigslist did when we did our feasibility study, and saw that they were selling jobs in a few markets, selling job listings in a few markets, and so we're like, all right, that's how classified sites make money, pretty easy. We just need to get some traffic, and then we'll throw up PayPal, and then we'll start making money. And it didn't work like that at all. I mean, first off, we didn't realize that we weren't going to be able to get a trade license. Secondly, we didn't realize that we weren't going to be able to get any kind of credit card gateway up onto our site. And thirdly, we probably never had to realize that at that point no one was going to pay us to put jobs on our site, because we never even got to that point, but they probably wouldn't have anyway. We had to kind of figure other things out. And so, you know, the business model now is, in terms of how we make money, is various forms of advertising, from display advertising to property listings and certain kind of businesses trying to reach consumers. But we still don't charge for job listings, which, had we realized those possibilities when or realized the impossibility of that at that stage when we'd done the business plan, we might have come back and decided, oh, well, it's impossible. We're not going to be able to make any money, so let's not do this. So being naive actually helped us a bit, I guess.
When you started back in 2005 with your $12,000 and you were sharing each other's subways and that kind of thing, did you ever, you said about global, etc. Did you have this vision that you would eventually grow, and did the name and the brand come into that at the very beginning, that this will be a global brand, it will be Dubizzle, but people will use Dubizzle in Jordan and places like that?
I think, yeah, early on, quite early, we realized that the value of classifieds is more than just one market, but many markets, and that it's also replicable. So if you look at other classified models, and we were looking a lot at the time at Craigslist, they were launching multiple states and cities and launching these cities very quickly, and it was like, okay, well, let's get Dubai right, and let's focus on that. Let's become, the brand for Dubai when it comes to classifieds, and then we'll look elsewhere. And at the time, it was still open to, maybe we'll look at large expat cities around the globe and take it there, or maybe we'll look at neighboring markets that are similar to Dubai in terms of culture and language, and so I think we eventually went with obviously the idea. What we've done now is we're across the Middle East and North Africa, because we saw a lot of similarities around language and culture. But I think what we'll say now, 2 years on from having launched in all of those markets, is that the Middle East is a very it's a very different market. I mean, apart from language similarities and some cultural and religious similarities, every market is completely different from another, and it's not equivalent to the U.S. and how similar, say, Florida is to California, even though they're so far away. I mean, the differences between Morocco and Qatar are vast from both an economical standpoint as well as a cultural standpoint, language standpoint. So we're dealing with those and JC, we've just recently sort of reorganized the business to sort of really focus on that expansion. So JC is leading a team with leading one half of the organization towards our expansion, and I'm leading the half of the organization that is focused on the UAE and continuing to improve that product. So he can talk a bit more on that, but it's been sort of really, again, naivety to sort of think that just because they share those similarities that they are the same market, but they're obviously not. And so trying to cater towards that and allow them to develop their own individuality, just like Dubizzle in Dubai has become a platform that is catered to Dubai in the way that you search for things and look for things. All of these markets need something that does that as well.
So you started off in English, I believe, as your first site. Was that a brave move back then, in an English site with an Arabic-speaking country, or did you have again a vision and a plan of what you were going to do?
No, I don't think that was necessarily a risky move at that point in time. Everyone, I guess the target demographic that we were targeting were expats. And for the most part, expats spoke English. Even if English wasn't their primary language, they spoke it. And that's how they did business here and did everything that they did. So I think, at that time, as it is today in Dubai, English was, by far the prominent language. But yeah, it was definitely a big learning experience going into Arabic. It still is, and I think that now we've learned a lot. It's been, I think, 2 years since we had an Arabic version of the site. But yeah, it was weird the first time, designing and actually seeing a Dubizzle where I couldn't understand what was on the page, and how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that the product is up to the same caliber, and how do you make sure the content is up to the same caliber and the usability and all that sort of stuff? That really took some, I think, development of our team and having, the right skills in the right roles and in the people that you trust to be able to really kind of deliver that same experience across different languages.
As the head of international Dubizzle now, when you're obviously going into other parts of the world, countries in like Saudi and places like that, their mobile usage is way more than it ever was back in the day. Do you take on a new country and go, well, we started in English on a desktop in 2005. When we move into another country, we're going to go Arabic on an iPhone? Or is it always website and app, or do you go app and website?
One of the things that I think we realized after being in our new markets for a little over a year was that, as Sim said, that these markets are so different. They're so different from one another. They're so different from the UAE. And what we had known that, but I guess what we realized we had essentially done was taken this site that had developed and been iterated and redeveloped many, hundreds of times over the past 5 years at that point, specifically for the UAE market. And it was very, very well tailored for what people require here and what people do here and the culture here and all that. But copying and pasting that, into another country, even though we flip it and change the language, doesn't really have that same kind of that feeling, and I think Classifieds, we realized, is very much a local brand. It's not like Facebook, where Facebook can be, the same thing everywhere, and it's localized because it's just a group of your friends. It really needs to be homegrown and grassroots, and it's such an integral part of that culture that it needs to really be of that culture. So that's when we kind of made this decision that, look, we need to kind of split things up a bit here. These are very different businesses. And in the Middle East, outside of the UAE, we're a startup. People don't know us, and if they do, it doesn't matter if we have 300,000 listings in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and it's real easy to sell your car there. If it doesn't work in Lebanon, if it doesn't work in Saudi, then who cares? So we decided to split the company up into basically two organizations, one going after these very different, going after these very different goals. And one of the things we decided we needed to do was to start from scratch with this, the product in the Middle East and in North Africa outside of the UAE, to get back to the roots, to think about what do the users there need, what stage is the site at, how many listings does it have. We have a site in Dubai that has hundreds of thousands of listings, but if in another country you have 25,000 listings, how different do you need to search? Things such as that. And to also make it so we get basically this kind of, I guess, base level site that does all the things that it needs to do, but then to split it off for each country and allow people on the ground and input from the ground there to let it develop parallel to the other sites, but to forever be different.
And the people on the ground, so you said back at the beginning you used to go into Spinneys and text people, will you be doing that in the countries now moving forward, or?
Yeah, we are doing that. Not Spinneys necessarily, but yeah.
The international versions.
Yeah. I mean, a lot, it's, a lot of it has been kind of trying to rediscover what we did in the beginning. And it also comes down to constraints, we had less constraints the second time around. And so you want to try different things, but there's a lot of learnings that you get from having those constraints. And so, it's one large experiment, and sometimes you have, every once in a while you have to learn the same lesson once or twice. And that's certainly happened, but it's great. It's great that we get to learn that, and we are learning that there as well.
And what about we talked about at the beginning, the growth and the expansion and global, moving into that. You're in Dubai, obviously, and then now the MENA region. Do you have plans to go global and head towards the West and kind of back to where you guys came from? Is that the goal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that maybe a better question is, do we have plans to expand that throughout, outside of the countries that we're now expanded into? I guess the answer is we don't have plans. Having 10, we're actually now in 10 additional countries, aside from the UAE. There's 3 countries we were going to be in, but we're not in. It's a huge. We've bit off a lot to chew, and we're trying to create what we're trying to do in Dubizzle MENA, what we call it, is really create a model for creating local classifieds and really bringing them to a point where they then have a team on the ground, and that team on the ground really grows up into really a local business, a local business that's completely of that market and has looser affiliations, isn't just basically a complete clone of what we have here. And I think we have a fantastic strategy, and I think we have as far as I know, the team best assembled to ever do that. And it's incredible to see what we've done in just a few months. So, I mean, if that works really well, and if we're able to really nail that strategy, and it doesn't mean that we're going to become what we are in the UAE in every single one of those countries. I mean, that's hard to do, but if we're able to have a pretty good success rate, why not try for more markets once we've had some success in the ones that we're in? That being said, are we going to go after the U.S.? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very, very difficult to topple someone like Craigslist, a very established kind of classifieds marketplace where, there's the network effects of all the sellers are there because the buyers are there, and all the buyers are there because the sellers are there. It's very hard to disrupt. So I think there's a lot of places where that doesn't exist, which we would probably go first.
What would you say your success, is it down to timing, or is it skill, or is it a bit of both?
A lot of it's timing, yeah. I think that if we tried to start Dubizzle right now and there was already another Dubizzle here, it wouldn't work. If we tried to start Dubizzle in the US, I don't think it would work. So especially with this business, it's timing. I think that there's luck, and I think we did a few things right along the way as well. But
there's obviously the saying, I'd rather be lucky than good, and we have been lucky in a lot of senses. But I think that a lot of it had to do with, and I think that you'll all agree that there's a real lack of customer service focus. Companies that will do anything to make sure that you are their client and you are their client for life. And so, from the very beginning, we made a commitment that we will answer every email. So we had our mobile numbers up on the site for 4 years. You could call us at any time of the day. And people did call us at any time of the day. And a lot of times they would ask really silly questions like, oh, I see that car that you have for sale on Dubizzle and I really want to buy it. And it's like, well, it's not those 30,000 cars are not my car, unfortunately. You need to just send an email to the person, and you can ask the early starters, the amount of phone calls that we would answer in the office. Be like, that's not my job, that's not my apartment, that's not my car. You just need to send an email through the website.
Imagine trying to park 30,000 cars.
Yeah. It became a joke in the office, like how many, we were almost counting the amount of phone calls that we would get. But it was because we didn't want anyone to try and use the service and not be able to get through. And so I think that dedication to customer service, to making sure that the product works, to making sure that that your customers, which they're free, but at the end of the day they are your customers. We would be nothing without the people that use our site are happy and that they're getting what they want out of the site. So. It was lucky in our timing. Someone definitely could have started a little bit before, but other people started after us, and we've definitely sort of experienced some competition along the way. But I think it was the dedication to the customer that really ended up being the difference.
Is there any advice you've got for anybody out there that isn't going to go into classifieds, that you sit back and think, you know what, if I wasn't doing Dubizzle, I'd maybe do this? Not saying share it and lose your next multi-million idea, but is there anything that you think is not here yet, like Craigslist wasn't here, but is soon to come, and when it does come, it's going to go boom? Or is that a secret?
I mean, I think that I think in this industry, you can see things come and go, and it's easy to also look towards more mature markets and see what works and what doesn't. You've seen Rocket come in and do relatively well with Namshi, but not do so well with Mazado. You've seen people come and go, and is it because the product wasn't right? Is it because the market wasn't right? I think that you could debate both. There's definitely a lot of space left in this market for other e-commerce type websites, and I think that the more that we all try, I think the more that we'll get it right, and the more opportunity. Amazon didn't become number one overnight. It was the vision of a very strong leader. It was the iteration of a product that became very good. It was commitment to the customer. Zappos is the same way. Zappos was able to carve out a niche within Amazon's market because of those values and those characteristics. So I would never try and dissuade someone from starting something because I was afraid that it would compete. I think that this market is still very virgin. I think that the more competition, the better we're all going to be at the end of the day, because it'll make us stronger than to sort of sit back and expect that we'll always be number ones.
And what about the Dubizzle offices? I've seen a couple of pictures that have put online and things. Tell us a little bit about the hype and the environment about the offices.
I actually wanted to just comment real quick on the previous question a bit too, because I think that it wasn't like Sim and I showed up here and we were like, what business model from the West can we bring here? Or, hey, classifieds works in the West, let's do it here. It really started with a very real problem that we were having and everybody was having, and I think that's really where any kind of entrepreneurial idea should start. I mean, it should start by solving a problem that somebody has, or some business has, or people have. And once you've identified that problem, that frustration, and you're just like, gosh, there's got to be a better way. Then maybe you look at, well, I know of a better way. In our case, we were like, we know of a better way. There's Craigslist that seems to work pretty well. And then you take the basic idea and then you iterate it and iterate it and iterate it until it really fits this market and fits the problem and solves the problem here. In Dubai, we have a little over 70 people. And then throughout the markets, Middle East and North Africa, we have about another 50 or so people. And it's not, these are full-time people that are working for us. Sometimes it's, through a partner or something like that. But yeah, that's the number of people that are full-time dedicated to spreading the flame.
And there's a couple of questions. How do you keep the culture of the startup going? What innovations do you have? Do you do anything that just keeps that kind of that buzz and that vision moving forward within the team?
I think we're constantly reinventing that, and maybe the startup culture is really one of just constant change, and that's definitely something that we've captured, for better or for worse, and I think that one of the books I've read recently that I really liked, and we all kind of read it, was The Lean Startup, and that defines startups as, I believe it's something like a business operating in really uncertain environment. And I think that we are kind of operating in a very uncertain environment. At least our ambitions are very uncertain, and we're going after them. And the risk and reward is massive. And we're, there's no like set path that everyone knows you can follow in order to achieve this, and there's no kind of cruise control that we can just click and we know we'll get there. It's a matter of constantly trying new things and new ideas bubbling up, and us being convinced that this is the next big idea and trying it, and then recognizing its shortcomings and taking those learnings and part of that into the next big idea. And I think that anyone that works at Dubizzle will tell you that in the time they've been there, they've seen lots of change, and it's about embracing that environment of change, because it's also an environment of growth, which I think is also important. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Yeah, I think that it's a good question, and from other people that we've talked to that have had companies that have grown quite rapidly, it tends to be that they say, at the 50 employee mark, things really start to change, and you never want to get rid of that culture where people feel like they're part of something small, and so they dedicate sort of everything to the success of something that they feel like they're changing. And as soon as it gets big enough where maybe they don't feel like their day-to-day is affecting, they can't see the effect of that day-to-day, I think that you start to lose that ability to call yourself a startup, or to be able to recruit people that are interested in a startup. And then all of a sudden at 50, you start needing more policies and more procedures, and your holiday forms are a little more strict. And before it was like, oh, maybe I'll take an extra day, and so it's just like a bit of a snowball. You need to get everything. You need all this structure. All of a sudden, you need all this structure, and so we've dealt with now we're at 75 and plus people in the market, and so we are constantly trying to make sure that people feel like they are part of what is affecting the business on a day-to-day, and that innovation is very important, and creativity is very important, and we don't put a lot of emphasis on titles, but at the same time you need to make sure that people feel like they can progress in their career. So it's very tricky, but I hope that we're doing it, and I think it's a testament to the people that we've been able to hire, and don't go trying to steal our employees, but we've been able to hire really, really talented people across the entire organization, and it obviously wouldn't be here if we hadn't. And so I think the environment and the vision and the idea is a testament to the people that we've been able to come and work for us. Did
you find any of them on Dubizzle.com?
We found most of them on Dubizzle.com, but
well, just going to Dubizzle.com. What's the most expensive thing that you guys have bought on Dubizzle?
Like professionally?
Yeah, like, so you go and do Dubizzle and you think, oh, I'll buy that car, or I'll rent that apartment. What's the most expensive thing?
There was a 747 on Dubizzle at one point for, like, I don't know, 1.5 million dirhams, and JC bought it. But I bought a bicycle at the same time, so.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. So you're expanding into new countries, but are you also looking at expanding your product portfolio?
Yeah, we are. I think that one thing that you can do, one thing that is really beneficial with a classifieds model is that once you become number one in a market, once you're able to be so successful, it creates this network effect. So the buyers come to where the sellers are, and the sellers come to where the buyers are, and neither one of them are willing to try something maybe different because they know that it works and because it's effective. And so once you have that and it's sort of self-generating, it just sort of moves, upwards and to the right. You're able to hopefully leverage that to launch new ideas and new products. So we are experimenting right now with a couple of different ideas about separate sites that might be beneficial to the average Dubizzle user. To look for others, maybe towards e-commerce, or I don't really want to give away what we're looking at, because who knows if we end up launching it or not. But I think that the general idea is that there are lots of people that use Dubizzle, and they use it at different points in their life. So they might use it to find a job at one point, and then 6 months later they might use it to find an apartment once they found the job, and then they might use it to furnish that apartment, and then they might use it to buy a car or sell a car or whatever. And so it naturally, because it's that horizontal platform, it naturally lends itself to what is the next thing that I might need.
A guy on here says, I met my wife in Dubizzle. So I don't know who that was, but congratulations for finding these guys.
That's Osama, who works at Dubizzle, and his wife works at Dubizzle, and it was they met working at Dubizzle and then got married. And so that's one of the success stories that we're obviously very proud of, to be able to introduce two people who will spend the rest of their lives together.
Excellent. Yeah. Round of applause. Okay, so just a couple more questions. So JC and Sim, what's your primary objective for 2013 in the UAE region?
This is to me, obviously. I look after the UAE. We're looking to improve. I think what JC sort of hinted at it before is that sort of 2 years ago, we took on some investment and took on a partner and looked to really actively take Dubizzle and the platform regionally. And with that, it meant that we were going to put the UAE on hold from a sort of product and business perspective to really focus on that region. And with the new restructuring, we've sort of realigned those visions so that we have teams that can look after both. We don't have to sort of keep the UAE on hold. Even though things continue to grow and the business is doing well, we are re-looking at and refocusing on the UAE product. So I'm sure there are frustrations on a daily basis using Dubizzle, and so we want to address those. We want to improve the property rental section. We want to improve the way that the amount of cars and the way that you search for cars on Dubizzle. We want to improve the job section for employers to be able to get more relevant, less CVs. Apparently the average is like 300 CVs per job, but we want to reduce that but give you more quality. So we're really starting to look at the verticals within Dubizzle, mainly cars, overall goods, property, jobs, and how we can improve those user experiences within those sections and get people more leads or let them find more things.
Where are you focusing on at the moment, or is it a general spread across the rest of the region?
Markets aren't always necessarily ready for online classifieds or receptive to it for whatever reasons, and there's so many variables that go into that if you try and predict it beforehand, you don't really you're just not going to be able to do it with much accuracy, and it's much better, and probably you'll know for certain if you actually just try. And so yeah, I mean we'd like, of course, to be quite successful in all 10 of these markets, but and we're going to really try to do that in all those markets. And we really just recently launched this new product in almost all those markets. Come next week, hopefully we will have launched it in the remaining 3 markets where it still has kind of the the version of the product similar to the UAE. And then from there, it's really just going to be iterating and looking at how people are engaging with the site and trying new things to see what works and what doesn't. And then those countries where we really see people taking it on, and it's really kind of engagement takes off, and direct kind of returning visitors and things such as that, really take off, then those are the markets where we're going to really invest more and really get not just a few people on the ground, but a full team on the ground, and move kind of product development and all that sort of stuff onto the ground. Where those are I hope they're all of them. And if there was just a few, I hope they're the biggest ones. But you can't necessarily dictate that.
Do you worry, and what are the threats about the scams and fake listings and things like that, and how are you going to kind of try and monitor that moving into these new countries?
That's a big part of what we do, and that's a large part of that's one thing you don't really expect when you're getting into this business, is just how difficult that is. But it's a huge part of our strategy. I mean, if you have a site full of scams and spam, then who wants to go to a site like that? I mean, it's a horrible experience. It's a bad product. But for the most part, it's very, very clean. But the same methods that we use in the UAE don't necessarily work in these other markets. So in the new markets, it's much more labor intensive. We're really building out we have a team that we've had for a long time, but we're really building out and expanding that team to do a lot more manual checking. There's lots of things that machines can check, that machines can catch, but there's lots of things that needs human intuition and understanding and all that to really be able to filter out. And for us, that's a really big priority, is making sure that we have clean content. And that's one way in which we intend to beat our competitors.
So when you're uploading something for Dibizzle and it says, please wait, your photo has been approved, it actually is being approved by somebody?
It is, yeah, it's actually being approved by someone. Yeah.
That's cool. Who do you consider your role models, and what drives you?
I think we're inspired by success stories, and so I don't think that there's one particular role model that I really associate with, but I think at different times during our story there were sites or there were successes that we drew inspiration on. So one of them was YouTube. So it was like 2006, and YouTube sold to Google for like $1.6 billion without ever having generated, a profit and having generated very little revenue. And so I think that at that point it was an inspiration about what a site that has a very clear community, where people love the site and will always, will continue to visit that site, and we'll spread that site by word of mouth. I mean, all of us heard about YouTube from a friend. They didn't advertise to us. It was told to us. A link was sent to us. How powerful that was. And that Google is a testament to say, like, we can monetize this site. If you can, basically what they said at the time was, if you can build a site that this many people come to and build a community around that idea, then anyone can monetize it. Monetizing it is not that big of a deal. So I think at that point it really drove our passion for not bringing in fees, not trying to over advertise, not trying to over monetize, but to build a site that had a community that people really felt passionate for and loved. So I think that's one of our inspirations. But the guys behind it, I don't really know their profiles that much. I know Zappos is an inspiration for JC. Facebook, obviously, Mark Zuckerberg, even though he seems to be a bit of a dick. But yeah, I mean, I think it's more success stories than individual personalities, for me at least.
All right, I've thought of some role models. So I'd say there's a few people where there's particular parts of what they've done that I really admire and would like to learn how to do it like they did. So as Sim said, Tony Hsieh, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. who started Zappos. And this guy, he started Link Exchange that sold to Microsoft, and then he actually invested in Zappos before kind of taking it over. And the guy's track record, if you look at how long he ran these companies and how much he sold them for, he created about $100 million of value a year, which is pretty incredible. And with Zappos in particular, I think he kind of figured a lot of things out by that time in his career. And they were really struggling to kind of beat the competition, to beat the likes of Amazon, and we're under a lot of pressure. And I think where a lot of kind of CEOs would say, you know, let's really look at the costs, and I don't have time to think about kind of, you know, certain fundamentals of the business. He refocused on vision and culture and all these things, really, I guess, trusting that really nailing that, it would kind of make everything fall into place, because that's what kind of gets the best out of people, attracts the best people. And I think that, you know, anybody wants to read a great book on that sort of stuff is it's called Zappos Delivering Happiness, and that's been definitely a huge inspiration for me. Steve Jobs, obviously, I mean, that guy's a complete dick. I mean, if Zuckerberg's a dick, that guy's just an asshole. But there's certain things that are really, really interesting that you can learn from what he did. Obviously, it's so impressive, his dedication to just perfection and just complete unwillingness to compromise even the smallest bit on anything. I mean, he wanted perfection out of his products, and that's right down to the design of the circuit board that no one would ever see. And one of the things that I think is most impressive about him that I really realized is that, you know, and I think is a really important thing for startups to realize, and any company to realize, is that A players want to play with A players. So if anyone's a basketball fan, you know, there's a good example of LeBron James going to Miami when he could have been sacrificing like half of his salary so he could go to Miami and they could get a few other fantastic players, and he'd have a shot at playing with the best players in the league and winning a championship. I mean, he could have earned a hell of a lot more money, but the reality is A players want to play with other A players. And he was, you know, anybody who's fantastic, if you put him on a team of people who aren't fantastic, who don't care, they're going to either leave or they're going to just come down to that level. And, you know, Steve Jobs really saw his role as kind of trimming the hedges of Apple and making sure that those A players didn't have to be burdened by dealing with people who weren't up to their level. And all A players dealt with A players. And I think that's the way that they recruited. And I think that's the type of team that we've assembled at Dubizzle. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind when we recruit and all that sort of stuff. And it just raises everyone's game, and everyone really appreciates working with people who are awesome. They do. I do. And I'd say last but not least, and I'm getting a bit long-winded here, which I tend to do, is there's a book called Good to Great, which is really old, well, 10 years old. And one of the things it talks about there is level 5 leaders. And I actually don't know, I can't name off any of these level 5 leaders, but these people are very rare. Steve Jobs was definitely not a level 5 leader. But these are, they have certain traits around humility, but also passion and dedication to a certain cause, taking blame for when things go bad, but then also passing on credit for when things go well. And also kind of, you know, there's a lot of characteristics that they have, and, you know, having, I guess, brutal honesty about what the facts are that face them. And the way that they kind of found these level 5 leaders is they looked at the similarities between a number of companies, about 20 companies that over 15 years beat the market by like 8 times. And then were also able to, when they left the company that they were in, to have succession where the next leader was able to kind of continue along that path. And that's not something, I don't think Steve Jobs was that person. I sold my shares in Apple, and I would suggest you do the same. But I think that, you know, package of person, and these are not necessarily the high-flying people that everyone knows their name, is definitely really something to aspire to, especially if you want to be a business leader. So,
just kind of before we wrap up, if you could do it all over again, would you? One of the questions.
No. Yes, I would, obviously. It's been difficult. We've been here 7 years now, and I think that we had planned to be living on a beach in Thailand 6 years ago. So that obviously didn't happen. But it's been difficult. There are relationships back home, there are families, there are friends, and looking around at all the faces, the majority of you are expats and can relate to that and empathize that these are relationships that you don't want to lose. This is a city that you're not necessarily from, but it's been great, and so there are hard times, but there are definitely good times. And, especially the first few years, JC and I went through some tough times, and luckily I feel like looking back now, luckily we went through those hard times at different times, because I think if we would have gone through those hard times at the same time, we would have just quit. I think that our successes early on were personal stories by people that we would meet, and when most people hadn't heard of Dubizzle, but one person out of 50 would say like, oh yeah, I've heard of that site, and yeah, I sold my car on it. And so that's sort of what kept us going at the time. And so I would definitely do it again, obviously. And yeah.
And just before we wrap up, if there was one piece of advice that you guys could give to our audience and anybody looking to go into business, is there one bit of advice that you would offer them today?
I'd give them maybe two. When I asked my dad for more money, apart from the $6,000 that I put in, he gave me a couple, but I asked him for more because we were running out. And he told me that necessity is the mother of all invention. And so I was like, well, money could be the other way, but thanks, Dad, but I'm starving over here. And that's what he told me. And so I was like, all right, well, let's figure it out, And so I would say limit yourself, and I would also say create as much value as you can before if you're looking to start something, if you're looking to eventually bring on funding. JC and I took funding at the last minute. We created as much value as we could create before we had to put a value on that value that we were creating. So, yeah, those are the two things that I would say.
Yeah, I would say probably something along the same lines, and with a focus on building value, because I think that building value is much more important than figuring out your revenue stream, because we obviously had no idea if you looked at our original business plan. But then, if you probably, if you have an idea of how to solve a problem and how to create value for somebody, if you're wrong, you're probably not so far off, and it probably just needs a little bit of tweaking, and that tweaking can happen fairly quickly by just thinking about how can I test my riskiest assumptions, and continue to test my assumptions and iterate and change this idea slightly until it really just nails what the problem is, and it really solves it for people to the point where they just are begging for it, and they just love the idea and they love you for coming up with it. And that can be figured out quite quickly and quite cheaply, but a lot of people just want to rush into their idea because they like the idea, and maybe they never figure that out, and they run out of money before they get the chance to change it. So that's what I would say. Sure.
But listen, guys, we're coming to the end of the time, but thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join our first startup grind here in Dubai. I'm sure the audience have enjoyed it just as much as I have, and yeah, thanks for coming down.
Yeah, we'd really like to thank Laith, and we think that what's going on here at Make, part of the email newsletter and is really, it's looking at what does this market need, and being able to put something in here. I mean, just a testament to everyone here and coming here, for coffee. Really appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's great.
Like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about you guys. And yeah, thanks for coming down. Thank you very much.
And thanks Simon for having us at this first startup grind. That's pretty flattering.
And
thank all of you guys for actually paying to come hear us talk. I don't think we've done this for free, and I don't think we've ever had this big of a turnout. So it's pretty amazing.
But no, if you put your hands together, thank these guys for coming down. Thank you, guys.